Hi, everyone, and welcome to the In the Shoes of podcast, where I make it my goal to see life as much as possible from someone else's point of view. Just like we all have a unique heartbeat, every single one of us sees life only from our own perspectives. Think about it. Can you see and process life exactly as Elon Musk sees and processes life? The answer is you can't, and it applies to every living conscious being here on this pale blue dot. Mic check, 1, 2, 1, 2. There are a lot of issues in the world, as always, right? And one of them, especially in the States and probably all over, I don't know, is the issue of racism. Racism is not good. We all know that, right? Right? I mean, don't we know that? Maybe we don't. Some of us, and maybe there are just things that we don't realize that we do that are even just kind of racist, like a little bit of some microaggressive type things, or just, some things that we do or say that we're just not thinking it through about how it might affect another person. So Zakiyyah Walker, the person I interviewed in this amazing episode, addresses a lot of these things, and she has built her business around a specific niche, which you're going to hear about. It's fascinating, and she has a lot of insight, especially for those of us like myself. I'm a white dude, and I'm not saying that I'm not ashamed of that. No, I mean, hey, I'm a white dude, and I'm from the Midwest. That's what it is, But with that, growing up in a more homogenous environment, I feel that it's pertinent that I learn from various cultures, get, more culture in my life. I mean, I've had the great opportunity of being able to travel around the world and meet with other people from different cultures and people from all walks of life, especially even just doing this show, which is phenomenal. But, I just feel like whether you're in New York or Paris or a small town in Nebraska, we all owe it to ourselves and to humanity in general to really learn about other cultures, about other races, especially if we are in a homogenous environment. I grew up in a very small town in Nebraska. Again, not ashamed of that. There were some beautiful parts of it, but I owe it to myself and to others to get educated and to learn more about those around me, especially in the country, this beautiful country that we're in, where we are all kind of working around how we're all supposed to be hanging out together and doing business and working. And it's not always pretty, obviously, right? But let's try to make it a little bit more pretty. Let's try to make it a little bit more cohesive, a little bit more accepting, a little bit more equitable. Right? So, wasn't this nation supposed to be built on certain foundations, one of which is equality among the people? Anyway, I'm going to get off my soapbox, and let's dive right into this marvelous interview with Zakiyyah Walker. Once again, everyone, this is Zakiyyah. Your website is leoseason.com, right?
Right.
Excellent. So, and usually I get right into the nitty gritty of who the people are, but let's go ahead and just get right into what your website is about. So if anybody's curious or they just want to look it up as they listen, then they can. So if you want to go for it.
Sure. Like he said, my name is Zakiyyah Walker. I own leoseason.com, personal revolution coaching for Black women. What I do specifically is I help women go from living lives of overwhelm and unfulfillment to being revolutionary. I started off as a life coach about 5 years ago, basically focused on rebellious spirituality and helping people figure out what they wanted to do in terms of spirituality that was different from the norms and what was accepted. I found that a lot of my Black women clients had different issues that I wasn't addressing, nor were any other coaches in the market addressing. So I essentially rebranded my company to focus specifically on Black women, and help them walk through the disconnection that we feel as people who have been disconnected from the African diaspora because we were snatched from our homeland via slavery, and therefore we have no connection to our culture. So being here, we have a lot of ancestral baggage, generational trauma, and what I call strong Black woman syndrome. So my coaching helps women through that and takes them through the process of healing and helping them live out loud in public on purpose.
I feel so privileged and lucky and fortunate to be able to interview people like you. And I was recently in DC. I went to the African American Cultural History Museum. And
Awesome.
yeah, oh, super, super cool. And I was able to interview a couple of really strong Black women there too. Um, and they gave me, it was actually, that's already a published episode in the DC discussions episode, and a few others. So I feel like there's a recurring theme here, and I think it's a theme that, and especially in this day and age, we need to keep on getting it out there. And I feel like your angle is a little bit even different. And I feel like we have a lot to discuss. I'm going to try to not keep you the whole night. I understand you're busy up there in New York, probably have a bunch of stuff to do. But can you address, before we even get into some more of the personal matters, what can you define the strong Black woman syndrome?
The strong Black woman syndrome is the idea that Black women are raised with, that the entire world is on our shoulders, that we have to take care of everything and everyone, and it is not acceptable for us to show any weakness or vulnerability. We constantly have to be strong all the time, and that breaks us. We can't be human. It's almost like this superhero trope, where we have our cape on all the time, as opposed to allowing ourselves to be human and be vulnerable and feel things and have moments of weakness like everyone else gets to.
Of course. And if you don't mind my asking, how do you go about addressing that with your clients?
Um, it's a process. I usually work with my clients anywhere from 3 months to 6 months. Sometimes I have clients that I work with up to a year. It's really a mindset shift and changing wrong beliefs. We have to get rid of constructs and these things that simply aren't true. And like I said, it's a matter of ancestral baggage and a lot of generational trauma as well. These things are passed down through us generationally. They didn't start with us. Essentially, though everything started in Africa. So essentially, Black women birthed the world. So it is in our DNA to take care of everyone and everything. And science indicates that trauma is passed down through your DNA, and those types of qualities are passed down. If you study any group of people that have gone through serious trauma, Holocaust survivors, that trauma is passed down into their DNA. Countries that have gone through great famine and civil war, that's passed down through their DNA. So being people that were not only taken from our culture, put into chattel slavery, and then essentially had our culture beaten out of us, that sits in our DNA and it's passed down. It's actually called epigenetics. That's the entire study of it. And a more formal word for it, specifically for people of the African diaspora, is post-traumatic sleep disorder.
Mm-hmm.
So in that vein, a lot of through slavery and historically, the woman was always the domineering person in the home, the one that was not only taking care of the slave homes, but also the master's homes. So we have this idea that we have to take care of everything and everyone from essentially the world starting in our womb, from the people, taking care of everyone and everything, from essentially being the ones that helped set us free from slavery. So that idea is passed down. So what I do with my clients, I have to essentially take them back and help them reset beliefs that some of the things that they are carrying, some of the trauma is not their own. Sometimes they feel this heavy baggage and don't understand why. It's because you're carrying ancestral trauma. You're carrying generational baggage that does not belong to you. So why do we go through the process of unpacking their baggage and figuring out what it is that they've brought into their lives and what it is that has actually been passed down to them, and trying to separate the two.
Wow. And have you found that there's a lot of just anger there, or is it more just, I don't know, like a sense of more of a sense of duty, or a combination of both? Because I feel like,
It's it's
go
a
ahead.
combination of everything. I
Mm-hmm.
tell my clients all the time, and I know from experience, love and resentment can live in the same space.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I am the oldest of three children. Um, and both of my parents were had chronic illnesses. So I was forced out of childhood at a very early age, and I had to take care of everyone.
How old
Um,
were you?
um, I had my mom got sick when I was 8, so I was her emotional rock. And then around 15 or 16, I was essentially taking care of the home financially. And
Wait, so you were the emotional rock at age 8, and
yes,
then at age 15, that's when you basically took over as head of household. Sounds like.
yeah, yeah, essentially,
Mm-hmm.
my mom got sick. She got really sick after my baby brother was born. And
Mm-hmm.
my mother was an amazing person. It's just her illnesses stole her life away from her. And I was the one, I was essentially a co parent. So I didn't have a childhood. I had to take care of everything and everyone.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and there was a lot of resentment that was there because I didn't make this choice. I didn't have any
Of
children.
course.
I didn't want this, but I had to because it was my family. And I
Mm-hmm.
love them more than I love anything. So resentment and love can absolutely live in the same space.
Most
Um,
definitely. Mm-hmm.
and as I got older, my mother got more ill. So I was very intrinsically tied to being the breadwinner and making sure that everything and everyone was taken care of. Through the time my sister and brother went to college and everything, I was I even when I moved out, I was taking care of two homes, paying bills for two houses, at a job that I hated. I
Oh,
would go to work every single day and cry in front of the building, but I had a family to take care of,
wow.
and
That
that was my responsibility.
that is intense. And do you still find is it still ongoing even to this day, where you still feel that responsibility? I guess what I'm asking here too is, do you feel that you struggle with the same things that you're coaching some of your clients through right now?
That's why I do it.
Mm-hmm.
I've developed a process where I can deal with it differently, and I can let go of things that are not mine. Where it's essentially called burn your cape. Stop saving people before you save yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so it was a difficult process, but I had to do it. I had a breakdown, and I attempted suicide not once but twice. And I needed to figure out how I was going to save my own life because I
Yep.
didn't want to live that life anymore. I didn't want to live a life of responsibility that wasn't mine. So I had a very real spiritual awakening, and after my second suicide attempt, I was like, I can't keep doing this. Either I'm going to die, literally, or I'm going to live the life that I want. So I chose to live the life that I want, and I went deep, deep into spiritual meditation. I found a spiritual practice that worked for me. I left my job and started other businesses at a clothing line, and I worked in fashion and beauty for years. So I did that on the consulting basis, and I loved it. I loved it very much. And then when
Good.
I felt like I felt that I had developed a process where I could come into my own, I also felt that I needed to help other people. I wasn't the only one struggling with this,
Hmm.
and it's my duty to. Essentially, I started as, like I said, I started as a coach for essentially everyone, and then I rebranded specifically for Black women. But my service has evolved, and that's how I ended up where I am now. And it's even more important to me, um, to that be my legacy, to stop, to break the chains that bond Black women, to help us no longer wear that crown of thorns. My mom passed away a year and a half ago,
I'm sorry.
and thank you. And my heart my heart is still broken. There's nothing worse than losing your mother, but because I did that work, I know
Hmm.
that I'll be okay. And because I'm living in my purpose, I know that I'll be okay. And everything that she instilled in me is not solely living through me, it's living through the women that I coach. And I am so happy for that. And I know for a fact that's what my mom wanted me to do.
Oh well, that has to be some consolation then, most definitely.
Yeah.
Um, with regard to, you mentioned legacy. Can
Mhm.
you elaborate on, like, let's say that, let's go actually straight to, I like to do that. This is a good practice I think for anyone, to go straight to the end of our days, whenever that occurs. No one really knows. But on your deathbed, what do you want to be remembered for when, you know, you're basically breathing your last? What is it that you really want to be remembered for? Just your life works and for how you affected people around the world.
I want to be known for helping Black women achieve sovereignty.
Hmm.
And I think about this a lot. That is my goal. And part of my coaching practice is help women start from the end, figure out what legacy you want to leave, and then go backwards and walk them through the process of achieving that. Legacy is so important. The tenets of my coaching are lifestyle, lineage, and legacy.
Yep.
Um, and legacy is usually our final lesson. So we go through a process of creating our legacy, and everything we do from there on is part of the legacy that we leave. So
Yeah.
I want to ensure that I want to make sure that Black women are in a better space than they were when I started doing my coaching. There's there's literally no one more hated in the world than Black women. And if you look on television, if you look out in the media, if you just walk down the street, if you're around any group of people that interact with Black women, we are treated like the lowest of the low. There's no protection for us. There's nothing.
I just, that is horrible. It's absolutely, and I feel like there's so many, and especially those of us, like, once again, me being a white guy from the Midwest. I live in Austin, Texas now, but I've traveled a little bit and I've talked with some people, and this is kind of a recurring thing where
Mhm.
I'm hearing about this ongoing, thing, basically just, people who are still subjects of extreme, of bigotry, of hatred, of just, racism. Let's call it what it is. And I
It's
feel like there are so many people who don't understand that it's still an ongoing thing. So can you elaborate a little bit on what is still just the cause of all this and what we can do? I know we know what you're doing, which is awesome, but maybe what do we all need to be more aware of? People, from whatever demographic, socioeconomic, and whatever their skin color is, how can we all be more involved in a solution, and even across political lines, if that's possible at this day, in this day and age? But what are your thoughts there?
The biggest issues amongst the biggest issues I find, there's the very real issue of white supremacy in America, and that affects all people of color, but
Hmm.
specifically Black women. There's patriarchy, and then there's respectability politics. So those are the three things that make that affect the vitriol associated with Black women.
Hmm.
If we
What is the third one there? Can you touch on that a little bit? The respectability politics?
Respectability politics is the idea that we just can't simply be human beings. We have to be perfect in order to be respected. And respect should be given to all people. But if you've ever heard someone say, well, I don't respect such and such because they don't respect themselves, like what exactly is it respecting yourself? We get called all types of names for being sexual beings. We get called bitches for being assertive and asserting our ground.
Mm.
If we don't act like the Queen of England and aren't perfect at all times,
Right.
we're
Well, that's another social construct too, like the
absolutely.
perfect, but that's more just like, white British whatever, So,
Yeah,
yeah.
exactly. There's a very real difference between how people would treat a Beyonce and how people would treat a Cardi B. And that's what I tell them. They're not very different people. They just have different personalities. Why would you not respect Cardi B but you respect Beyonce? There is no difference because Cardi has a sexual past and she's worked in the adult industry. People have to eat
Yep.
and everyone is worthy of respect. But if we do something that you don't deem respectable, we're all types of hoes and thoughts and all these ridiculous words that people come up with to describe us. And like I
Hmm.
said, no one gets more vitriol than the Black woman because we're expected to be perfect. We're expected to we raise families perfectly, but we're in a situation where we're raising families alone. We're expected to not be sexual beings, but when we're not sexual beings, we're prudes. It's almost like we can't do anything right.
Right. Like it's a no-win situation. Yeah, and what you're talking about here is exactly what I just interviewed a person here in Austin who she does sexual healing.
Hmm.
And we talked about that exact thing, and she mentioned the exact thing with regard to patriarchy and all of these things and respect. It's just it's amazing that it's so prevalent still. So here's another question then: how do you think? And I honestly didn't intend for this to become totally all about this, but I feel like this is a really pertinent subject.
This is
So
awesome.
yeah, no, it's very good to really get down in the nitty gritty here. What do you think then? How do you think most of us or a lot of us are kind of lying to ourselves maybe when it comes to, because especially those of us who are not on that side and of, or even people of color who are not like Black women
Hmm.
who possibly don't understand, because obviously there's a sheet pulled over people's eyes, and not just the KKK sheet, but we're just not, a lot of us probably aren't seeing that. So how is
Yeah,
it that how else are we deluding ourselves, I guess?
people are definitely not aware or refuse to acknowledge that white supremacy is a thing, patriarchy is a thing. Black men have a failure to understand that yes, they are Black men and they suffer from white supremacy, but they still have the benefit of patriarchy. The best thing people can do is acknowledge their privilege. And there's nothing wrong with acknowledging your privilege. We all have it in some form. White privilege does exist. Male
Hmm.
privilege does exist. Hetero and cisgender privilege does exist. Ableist privilege does exist. So I'm a minority woman. I'm a person of color. I grew up in the hood, but
Hmm.
I do have privilege. I am able-bodied. My gender corresponds to the gender I was born with. Those things are very important, and as people have a failure to accept that they do possess privilege. Privilege is about privilege is systematic and it's societal. It's not about what you've gone through individually. Life is harsh. We all know that. If you have white privilege, it doesn't mean that you haven't gone through anything personally. It just means that there are things that are easy for you because you are white. Patriarchy and male privilege indicates that things are easier for you because you're a man. Ableist
Hmm.
privilege, things are easier for you because you are able bodied. And we all have privilege that sometimes we fail to understand.
Totally. Yeah. Yeah, let's break it down some more. Can you give some more that was beautifully put, by the way. That was, I think, and even me, I don't think along those terms a lot, just being very honest, and it's very refreshing. I think we need to understand that. Can you dig a little bit deeper too? How else are is there anything that we're missing here that just general, just people that we're not seeing, even just the way in which we speak about, let's say, Black women, or that and I'm talking, of course, in probably a little bit of stereotype here too, and I want to tread carefully there, but if it's an ongoing thing, I feel like the more that we can identify errant thinking, and I speak as much for myself as anyone, I think the better off we can be, because awareness and being conscious of something is one of the first steps in addressing something and actually acknowledging something.
Absolutely. I think a lot of people think that racism is like the KKK and Confederate flags and people dropping the M-bomb all over the place. No, racism
Right.
can be very, very casual. It shows up in a lot of microaggressions. It shows up
Mm-hmm.
when the way you address certain women. Example. I worked at a beauty company where I was one of very few women of color. And we developed skincare products and makeup products. And when products came down and I would get samples, there would be three colors. There would be fair, medium, and tan. And then they would go, can you test this out? No, no, I cannot. I absolutely cannot, because there is no dark. Well, why can't I?
Mm-hmm.
Don't understand. What do you mean you don't understand? There is no dark. Don't pretend to be colorblind. I am a different shade. You
Exactly.
can see me. I can't use these colors. And they're like, well, that's the industry standard. Well, the standard needs to change, because people come in more than four colors. And then they put that under the guise of being colorblind. You go ahead and watch a beauty commercial and just put the black and white screen on and let people do their makeup and see how that turns out with your colorblindness.
Yeah.
Colorblindness is nonsense. If you say you're colorblind, that means you're refusing to see that other people are suffering because you're sitting in a place of privilege. We also have to discuss microaggressions, how you speak to people on the day to day,
Yep.
how you tell a person of color that they're smart or they're articulate, or you're pretty to be brown skinned, or oh, your hair is so different, I wish I had it. Don't say that. Or I had someone say to me, oh, it's tanning season, soon I'll be your shade. No Black person ever wants to hear that. Don't say that. Watch the things that come out of your mouth, because they're super offensive, and that's casual racism. And even if you're not like, I hate Black people, there are things that you say that indicate that you are casually racist. And if someone points it out to you, you get all offensively and you go into your feelings and you make it about you. That's a problem. If you're going to either admit that you're racist or you have some racist tendencies, or if you're going to be an ally, you have to listen. What I find in specifically with allies, and even in this feminist space, the feminist space is very white centered. And there's this thing called white tears, where essentially
White tears. Okay.
white
Let's hear
te-
this.
where white people want to speak for other people based upon their experiences. So they get very upset about about things that they think are offensive to people of color, but they have no idea. They've never been in the situation. So they start crying
Oh,
white tears and saying, I'm not racist, I'm not this, I'm not that. But you're not being sensitive. You're not listening to the actual people who have this experience. You block us out of spaces, but you want to talk for us.
is it kind of like one of those things where it seems like maybe it's not really about being an ally? It's more about like, look at me
Look at me, I'm
defending
so great, I'm
those who are
horrible.
exactly,
Exactly.
and wearing the kind of white, an association with the white tears, a white cape kind of, and
Exactly.
I think Hollywood has definitely helped progress that ridiculous image in some movies and all that, where it's just like, come on,
And with
it's like.
Amongst people of color, we call them white savior films. Things like The Blind Side. Um, those movies where
Yeah.
a white person comes in to save the poor black person. It's obnoxious. Um,
Yeah.
One of the things I have the biggest problem with is
Hmm.
something like Orange is the New Black. And people love it. It's fine. It's entertaining. It is what it is. Do you watch Orange is the New Black?
I've seen the first couple seasons and then I
Oh,
kind of just fell off. Yeah.
okay.
So I haven't been up to date with it.
The thing about Orange is the New Black, it is about a white woman a wealthy white woman who goes to jail for a year for a crime she committed maybe 10 years ago.
Hmm.
But a lot of the story is are built around the trauma of women of color. Now, I find that problematic because you're taking a white lens and you're telling the stories of women of color through that white lens, and you cannot possibly get it right, which means you're profiting off of black trauma. And Hollywood does that day in and day out. They want to tell these traumatic and painful stories of people of color, people in the hood, Hispanics, all of these people that are living difficult lives, but they're telling it through a white lens in a space where we're not allowed to tell our own stories because you block us out of your boardrooms, you block us out of your studios. And that is very, very problematic. We need to be able to tell our own stories. And many of us are pushing through. We have Issa Rae, we have Amir Barak, we have people that are pushing through because of new innovations in technology, but it's definitely not enough. Hollywood loves to profit off of black trauma, and it needs to freaking stop.
And it's been doing it for a long, long, long time.
Since
Okay, so
time.
going to the media, yeah. What else can we do then? Do you think to? It sounds like we need a revamp when it comes to the film industry and TV, everything, and just really switch it from, because let's be honest, it has been through a white lens for an extraordinary. I mean, well, since its inception,
Yeah,
right? And to this day, it still goes on. So, what are some things that, in your eyes, that we can do to change that up?
we can stop talking about diversity and actually be freaking diverse. These conversations, these meetings, and these workshops, and shutting down businesses for a day to talk about diversity are a waste of time. You get people of color in the door and you listen to them. You get them in the door and you listen to them. Don't make them a token. If you have one person of color in your entire business, that means nothing when you don't listen to them. Then you have things that happen like, excuse me, like what happened with Roseanne. I don't know who didn't see that coming. Who didn't see that coming? You should have listened. If you have let's just say, I've been working in beauty for years, so you see a Dove commercial come down where you have a woman start off as a woman of color, and then she washes with soap, and then she becomes white. How did that get through anyone? How did that get through QA? That doesn't
Right,
make sense. And don't
right.
hire just for the sake of hiring and have the numbers. Let people of color come in and advise you. I've been in the situation
Yeah.
where, like I said, I worked in beauty and I would be the only person of color in the room. And people would be shell shocked when I say something like, this product isn't going to work for black people. It's not going to work for black women. Even with hair products, it's just like, well, why won't this work for why Zakiyyah, can you test this? No, it's not going to work for me. My hair is kinky. What does that mean? You're developing hair products. You should know.
Right, and not just for a particular demographic, you know.
Exactly.
um yeah, one thing I noticed when I was traveling, I went to some parts of Asia, and I noticed that in the stores, a lot, because this is a widespread problem. I feel like this, well, probably a lot of westernization of the world anyway, but these products out there that are developed specifically to lighten skin tone,
Yeah.
like all over the place, whether you get to a 7-Eleven or whatever. I don't really know for sure if how, you know, how far reaching it is here, but even with like the product, like going from media to just general like beauty products,
Mhm.
how much of that is a problem right now in this day and age?
Oh, it's a problem, and it's always been a problem historically. Particularly the Look, blackness is demonized all over the world because white people have colonized all brown people. So the white is right. The lighter you are, the better you are. People in Africa are killing themselves, bleaching their skin to become lighter, to become more acceptable. That's
Sheesh.
happening here in America. Um, even there's historically black people have treated their lighter children better or didn't want a certain color person to marry into their families. There's been groups that dark skinned people have been left out of. Years ago, there used to be something called the paper bag test. And essentially, they would, if for a man to marry a woman or a woman to be acceptable in certain institutions, in certain clubs, acceptable to date someone's son, she had to be lighter than a paper bag.
Oh, wow.
Otherwise,
I had not heard of that.
otherwise
Okay.
otherwise she was not acceptable. So that's built in. There's a very deep divide amongst people of color. um there's a very deep divide with colorism, particularly in the black community. The lighter you are, the more acceptable you are, the more attractive you seem to be.
Hmm.
um as time is progressing, we are definitely beginning to accept melanated tones more. But if you look at Hollywood, all of the Hollywood starlets are lighter. All of the musicians are lighter. There are a lot of people that are super talented but can't get work because they are not light enough. So that's
Yeah.
something that's very, very intrinsically tied to not only the black community but the world. Um, think about it, people, the women of color that are in movies, they're usually very racially ambiguous. J Lo has played every race under the sun, and she's Puerto Rican. Now, Puerto Rican
Right.
started in the African diaspora, and they were dropped off in different places during the slave trade, and they mixed with various Aztecs and various other ethnicities. But at the end of the day, she's still a person of color. Do you see J Lo have a love interest that's another Hispanic or another person of color? No, it's always a white man. If you
Hmm.
if you look at Will Smith, his love interest in a movie is always a non-black woman. If you look, even Denzel, maybe he had Viola Davis, but that was in Fences, but that was also a very black play written by a very black playwright from the 70s. But even Denzel, who is unabashedly black and proud to be black, always has a leading lady that is not a black woman,
Hmm.
as it will
I guess
remind white
at
people that
least with,
they're black.
yeah. Well, at least with Will Smith, he did have Independence Day. I remember that one
Yeah,
where his wife was actually, she was a stripper too.
was
So I added another dimension. So
yeah,
I guess kudos for that one.
yeah, that was way above, way before its time.
Yeah. Yeah, it was. Um, so how do you think going from this side of things where it's a little bit, well, not even just a little bit, it's dark. There are some things that are, just there are some things that are going on in this country and across around the world, and this is just one out of a few that are like definitely not good, and you're doing your part to make change there. Now, on the flip side of all of that, what do you see in life? And it doesn't even have to necessarily be about racial equality and all of that, but what do you see in life that's just purely beautiful and a good thing, things that bring you intense joy?
Um, I spent a, I did, my undergrad degree is in broadcast journalism. At one time, I wanted to be a White House correspondent. So I
Oh,
am
cool.
obsessed with the news, probably more so than I should be. So I'm up on all current events, and the world is a dark and ugly, ugly place. Trump America is a very, very different thing.
Oh
Um,
yeah.
it's awful.
It is.
It is literally
It really is.
awful.
It's such a zoo.
It's all
Yeah.
dystopian. It really is. But
Yeah.
there's that light of and that light, that group of people that say, no, I'm not going to let this happen, not on my watch. So people organizing in their community, um, going up, challenging the president, running for office, people who wouldn't have done this before. They're stepping up and making their self known. In the those Parkland children, they lost 17 of their classmates, and they could have gone and cried to their parents, but they rose up and started a revolution. That gives me hope. People that fight to make the world a better place, that gives me hope. And every single day, it fills my heart. Even when I'm watching Black men get shot by the cops every day, when I'm seeing the Jeff Sessions separate immigrant families from their children and put these children in cages, that hurts my soul. But when I see a woman, a person of color, someone that's disenfranchised say, no, I'm not going to take this. I'm going to run for office. I'm going to start this protest. I'm going to start this petition. I'm going to take action. You will not do this on my watch. That's when I feel so much better.
Yeah. Would you say that people aren't just lying down and taking it? They're actually doing something.
Absolutely. Awareness is nothing without action. Don't waste my time telling me what you're thinking about. I don't have time for it. What are you going to do? Because we have to move.
I know what you're doing with the website and what you're doing. You're working with your clients, but do you have any you talked about even like being a journalist for the White House. You wanted to be a White House correspondent at one point in time. Are you thinking about entering politics?
It's a thought. It's definitely a thought. My work at coaching Black women is not done, but I think we have our lives have several different iterations. So that's something I am definitely open to.
Most definitely. What if you did run for something? How do you think you'd start out? Where do you think you'd go for? And even moreover, what would be your first thing or things that you would change in at least your community or a larger community?
I would definitely start out in the community that I grew up in. I grew up in Newark, New Jersey, and it's in Newark, New Jersey. It's an interesting place. It used to be very wealthy, well before the King riots, and then people started moving out, and it got poor, and then crack hit, and it became very destitute. Now it's seeing a resurgence and a whole lot of gentrifiers, but there's still that gentrified part of Newark, and there's still the very, very poor part of Newark. And the more they gentrify, the more they move poor people out, and the poor become more poor. So if you're moving more wealthy people in, where are the poor people going to go? They're going on the streets. So I would definitely, the most important thing to me is ensuring that the wealthy don't solely come in and take over the entire city, that poor people have a voice. And it's so important to me that poor people have a voice, because no one wants to listen to poor people and disenfranchised people. They want to listen to people who have the money, and it's not fair. This country, yes, it stands for going with the majority, but it's also, the Constitution ensures that the minority rights are not trampled on. And we're in a space right now where minorities and the disenfranchised are being trampled on. And it is my duty to speak for those people.
Which is that in and of itself is really good. I think we need more politicians who will actually they'll start, stop giving so much of a shit about themselves and about getting more money and all that, and actually caring. And when I say actually, I really mean actually caring. Like, I can feel it when you tell me that you would do that, but there's so many people out there that it's just, lip service. And I guess that's another question. How do we get to the point where we can start trusting? Is it redeemable even? Can we start trusting politicians just here in this country? And how do we get people to stop wanting just everything for themselves, me, an age old kind of everything's about, me, and get more of you know, a desire to help and to change and to actually bring about equality? What's the answer there?
We have to coordinate. We have to do. We have to organize, and we have to ensure that at the end of the day, politics is about money. So we have to figure out and rally around people who are going to make a change and put our money where our mouths are. These $1 million corporations spend money on anti-gay legislation,
Mm-hmm.
anti-immigrant, and things that are averse to people of color, to natives. We need to gather in our communities and put money around what matters to us: schooling, keeping immigrants safe, keeping poor people safe, ensuring that children have health care, have food, ensuring that children are not being separated from their parents and put in
Mm-hmm.
freaking cages. So yeah, those are things we have to stop thinking that we don't have a voice. This is our country. Those people work for us. And the more we organize, the more we can get done. They may not listen to one voice, but they'll listen to a million. They have
Right.
no choice.
Yep. So Zakiyyah Walker for president, then, that's what I'm hearing. You have my vote right
Yeah.
away. I mean, seriously, you just convinced me. So I'm totally in, and I'm gonna start campaigning right now. No, but seriously, yeah, I really do hope you consider getting into politics, because even just talking with you, and hopefully for the listeners too, that it sparks a little bit more of a fire. I mean, everybody is busy doing their own thing. We all have our jobs and families to take care of and things like that. But even if it's just a little thing here and there, being aware first and then what action to take. So, I think one of your main points here in this conversation too is action. We can talk all we want, but if we're not going to do anything, it doesn't mean anything. So if you have anything to offer there, I'm going to ask one more question after this, but if you have anything more right now to offer there with regard to actions that we can take for both, whether you're a person of color or if you totally grew up in a suburb in white America, whatever, what are some good actions that you would recommend?
The first thing you need to do is assess your privilege. Assess your privilege and be very, very honest with yourself about what privileges you have. If you're a white, if you're male, if you're straight, if you're cisgendered, if you're able-bodied, assess your privilege and acknowledge it. Understand that other people have it more difficult than you based on how they were born. It is, I'm not saying, no one's saying that you don't have problems, but your problems are a little different if you're a straight white male from middle America than if you are a gay brown kid from
Mm-hmm.
Camden,
Sure.
and understand that though it doesn't negate your personhood. It doesn't mean you need to feel sorry. It just means that you need to understand that people are different and they need different types of
Yep.
help.
That's good. And what kind of, and when, let's say that let's say someone from Iowa is listening to this and they are like, okay,
Mhm.
well, I'm recognizing my privilege here. What can I do about it? And what are some things that I definitely should avoid doing? Because we don't want to get into the white cape thing, the white tears thing. We don't need any of that. So what
Yes.
are some pitfalls we need to
No.
avoid when we're addressing some of those things?
Just- If if you're going to talk to a person that is different from you, don't white explain. Don't tell them how sorry you are or tell them what it's like being white. We all have to assimilate to whiteness, so
Mm-hmm.
we get it. Whereas white people never have to assimilate to any other culture. Listen with your heart and try to put yourself in someone else's shoes. Ask questions, but don't be offensive and stop. Jesus Christ, stop appropriating culture.
Can we just
Stop
please
it.
stop that?
Culture
Yes.
culture is not a costume. It is people's lives. Think before you do things. Think before you appropriate religion, appropriate outfits, appropriate hairstyles, appropriate music. Understand that various cultures have come up with something, and once you get your hands on it and claim it as yours, you're just
Hmm.
Columbusing. Don't do that anymore.
Gotcha.
Don't because Columbus didn't discover anything. He just came and staked his claim on it, and that's what happens with appropriation. You take all these things that have been here. You put cornrows in your hair. You put bantu knots. You almost Rachel Dozier the whole thing. Like, don't do that. Pay and understand. If you're going to do, it's okay to be appreciative of something and celebrate something that's someone else's culture. But understand that is someone else's culture. That means something to someone. Those cornrows in your hair have meant something to people of color historically. And if you put on an African print or a head wrap or I've seen people put on war paint, or around Halloween they put on native garb, or they do chanting, or you listen to hip hop music and all of a sudden you want to be a rapper. Understand where these things came from. They came from non-white
Hmm.
people, and that's okay. Y'all got a whole bunch of white stuff too that you created, and we get it. We understand.
Right? Yeah. Yeah.
You understand that is some white stuff. We get it. But just give us the same.
Yeah. No. Exactly. Oh well. I mean, yeah. There's been, I think, throughout history, there's been a lot of just, people stealing from various cultures and then like claiming it as, well, yeah, we created this rock and roll or whatever. And then you look back, it's like, well, let's actually look at the roots of rock and roll and things like that, you know? So, no, I'm with you. So what do you think? I was going to ask one more question, but I've got some more questions for you because I think we need to we
Okay.
need to hear your voice here. This is some good stuff, you know? I love it. Now, let's say when you have a family, let's say a man and a woman get together, or a woman and a woman, or a man and a man, and or a transgender, and it doesn't matter to me. But let's say it's we're talking cross cultural stuff here, and then they have kids too.
Mhm.
So, what do you think? Do you have any advice for kids out there who maybe have grown up in a multicultural family, multiracial family, to where how they can things that maybe they need to be aware of, or any advice for the parents out there?
Don't let anyone on the outside define what your family is. That is yours. You can define it any way you want to.
Yep.
And that's the most important thing, defining your family for yourself. Multiracial, if you're a multiracial family, that just means you have a whole bunch of amazing mixed
Yep.
all up in you.
Yep.
So, don't hide any part of that. Explore your lineage. Find out all the amazing things, whether you have African descent, Italian, Scandinavian. Everyone has someone to offer, and culture is so rich. Utilize that to your advantage and help you allow it to help you define yourself. There's too many people walking around looking like each other, talking like each other, and just being each other that I can't halfway tell the
Right.
difference. All of all of that mixture, that makes you you, and own that and
I
work it.
like that. And what are some of the what if you could give me maybe three? What are the three just absolute best aspects of just of Black culture? And please correct me if I even that statement right there is not, yeah.
No, no, it's fine. It's so. I mean, despite all the nonsense and the BS that you deal with when you're black, being black
Yeah.
is hard, but being black is so
Right.
amazing. You know, we can make something out of nothing. We really can. We can whip something up, and we can take the worst lot in life and make it look like it's amazing. Our swag is unparalleled. Um, we love with our hearts. We are supremely loyal. Um, and we are deeply spiritual, sometimes to a fault. But when we hold on to that which created us, no matter who we feel, whether you subscribe to the Abrahamic religions, African spirituality, Israelite, anything, we understand that there is something bigger than us, and our Creator has created us to create. And I don't mean just procreation, just creating people, but create something that is beneficial to the world, whether it's art, whether it's science, and that's something that's built in us as we're growing up. Our parents are telling us, look, the world, it may be a white man's world, but come in and kick it in his ass. Do what you have. So being black is lit. We're fun. It
That's
really is.
cool. I like that. Yeah. Anything else you have to add about just Black culture? Another beautiful aspect of it. Anything else to add?
Oh my God, there's so many beautiful things about Black culture. We're just us. We're different. There's literally nothing like Black people. And honestly, the world's is a better place because we're here.
Yeah.
We bring a flavor that doesn't that doesn't exist otherwise, from dance to the arts, everything. We put a little twist on everything. So
Yeah.
that's what I love about my people. That's what I love. Even in the face of adversity, when the world is kicking you down, we will do something super swaggy. That'll
Love
feel
it.
that.
Yeah. I hear you. That's cool. I tell you what, that is some really good stuff for, I think, a lot of us, especially, in the Trump world right now. And I think we need to hear more of your voice. We need to hear more, and not just your voice, like being a woman of color, but also we need to hear from strong, like, women, but strong women. But I say that with the caveat that, you don't have to always be strong. I mean,
Yeah,
as you can be vulnerable too, just like all of us, just like it goes the same thing for men too. Men can have
right.
that kind of the onus, like, oh, we got to be tough and all that all the time. But no, same thing there. Not
Oh man,
same thing, but
it would it would take me days to discuss masculinity and all the things that men can do. Oh,
right.
that's a whole different conversation.
That's when I go up to New York and we get together. We'll have to do a live interview because I feel like this is just like interview one of, I don't know. I feel like we could talk probably for 10 days straight and still have more
Yeah,
to talk about.
yeah, that's great.
Yeah, no, this is good stuff. And I'm going to ask you just one more question. This is actually just one more question, then I'm going to let you go. Um, so I want you to imagine that you're just walking along. Let's say you're in Central Park, you're walking along, and then just a kid comes up to you and he knows nothing about life whatsoever here in the States. And he's a kid from, I don't know, let's just say Bangladesh, but he speaks flawless English and all that. But he's visiting here and he was not really taught a whole bunch by his parents. And he just wants to get your opinion about what life is, what it looks like. What does it mean? What does it mean to be human even? What would you tell this kid? He's like, I don't know, 5, maybe 7, something like that.
It's a beautiful struggle. It's going to hurt. It's going to hurt. But then when you're through it, you'll look back and appreciate it.
Yep. What if he asked you, so why? Why is it going to hurt? What's the purpose there?
They're lessons. You're taught lessons and over again until you get it right, and then you move on to the next one. Um, and that's in life. And I'm not sure how far we're going to go here, whether what anyone's spiritual beliefs are. But even when you go on to the next life, those past lessons that you didn't learn in this lifetime, they're going to hit you in the next one. So,
There you go.
mm,
Well, that's cool. I think he'll, yeah, whether he believes you or not at that point in time, he'll definitely find out that, yeah, wherever you're at in life, definitely it will, you'll go through some struggle for sure.
yeah.
Well, Zakiyyah, thank you so much for doing this. I'm so glad we, had a chance to talk. And once
Thank you for
again,
having me.
oh,
This is
yeah, no, absolutely. And the whole point is, well, I want to get into your shoes as much as possible. And I feel like there are a lot of people in the States and all around the world that need to, try as much as we can get into your shoes. So once again, just a shout out to your site. It's leoseason.com.
yes,
And
it is.
yeah, so personal revolution coaching for Black women. I love it. And stay tuned for, I think we're definitely, when I go up to New York, I'm going to try to spend a week up there in the summer. Let's try to get together. I'll reach out and see if we can't do a live interview with some video and all that.
Of course, I'll guide you to all the good food.
Oh, all right, that's good. I'm hooked up then. All
Okay.
right. Well, thank you so much, and I'm gonna. Hey, thank you so much for checking out this episode of In the Shoes of. If you like or don't like the podcast, feel free to leave a review or reach out to me. My email is jnickel42@gmail.com. I can't promise you I'll get back to you right away, but I'll definitely try and get to it. Anyway, thank you so much for checking it out. Until the next time, see you later.